A record label told Freddie Mercury to hide his identity. His response was pure genius. It was March 15, 1973, and Freddie Mercury sat across from three executives at EMI Records in London. What they were about to tell him would force him to make a choice that would define not just his career but the future of rock and roll itself. The decision he made in that room would shock everyone and change music history forever. The morning had started like any other at EMI's headquarters on Manchester Square, in the heart of London's West End. Freddie, just 26 years old, had arrived at 9:00 a.m. sharp, wearing his signature tight black jeans and a flowing silk shirt. Queen had just finished recording their self-titled debut album, and this meeting was supposed to be about the release strategy. The band was on the edge of something big. They could all feel it. Brian May's guitar work was revolutionary, Roger Taylor's drums were thunderous, John Deacon's bass lines were hypnotic, and Freddie's vocals were simply otherworldly. But Freddie had no idea what was coming. Born Farrokh Bulsara in Zanzibar in 1946, Freddie had spent his childhood navigating between cultures. His Parsi family had given him a strong foundation, but from his earliest days in boarding school in India, he knew he was different. He loved piano, he loved performance, and he loved pushing boundaries. When his family moved to England in 1964, fleeing the Zanzibar Revolution, 17-year-old Farrokh became Freddie, not to hide, but to transform. He chose the name Mercury because he wanted to be fluid, fast, unpredictable, like the element itself. By 1970, he had formed Queen with Brian, Roger, and John. They had spent 3 years playing small venues, sleeping in vans, surviving on nothing but dreams and determination. Freddie worked at Kensington Market designing clothes during the day, wrote music at night, and performed whenever possible. He had reinvented himself once already, from Farrokh to Freddie. He had shed his old skin and emerged as someone bolder, more theatrical, more unapologetically himself. But now, sitting in that conference room with its mahogany table and leather chairs, 3 men in suits were about to ask him to hide again. Richard Cole, EMI's senior vice president of marketing, cleared his throat. He was 52 years old, grey-haired, impeccably dressed in a navy suit. He had launched dozens of successful acts. He knew the business. He knew what sold records. "Freddie," he began, sliding a folder across the table, "we need to talk about your image." Freddie's eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. He simply opened the folder. Inside were demographic studies, market research reports, radio station surveys. All of it pointed to one conclusion. Rock and roll in 1973 was dominated by a very specific image: white, British or American, conventionally masculine, often working class. The data showed that radio programmers were reluctant to play artists who didn't fit that mold. "We believe Queen has incredible potential," Cole continued, his voice measured and careful. "The music is extraordinary, but we need to be strategic about how we present you to the public." David Mitchell, the head of publicity, jumped in. He was younger, maybe 35, wearing thick-rimmed glasses and a brown suit. "The thing is, Freddie, your background, your real name, your family history, it's complicated for American audiences. And America is where the real money is." Freddie still said nothing. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The third executive, Thomas Barrett from International Marketing, leaned forward. "We're not asking you to change who you are," he said, though his words suggested exactly that. "We're just asking you to be strategic. Use your stage name exclusively. Don't discuss your heritage in interviews. Keep the focus on the music and the performance. Let people assume what they want to assume." There it was, out in the open. They wanted him to hide his Persian roots, to downplay his Zoroastrian background, to present himself as just another British rock star. They had done the research. They had the numbers. They knew what would sell. They wanted Freddie Mercury, the performer, but not Farrokh Bulsara, the person. The room fell silent. Outside, London traffic hummed steadily. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Freddie looked down at the reports again, his long fingers tracing the edge of the paper. His bandmates weren't in this meeting. This was just him and the suits. This decision was his to make. Cole tried to soften the blow. Look, Freddie, this is standard practice. Half the artists you admire reinvented themselves for broader appeal. It's not about shame, it's about strategy. You want Queen to succeed, don't you? You want your music to reach millions? Freddie finally looked up. His dark eyes met Cole's directly, unwavering and absolutely certain. How many records do you think we'll sell if we follow your advice? Freddie asked quietly. Cole glanced at Mitchell, then back at Freddie. With the right marketing, the right radio push, the right image, we could be looking at gold records, maybe even platinum if the stars align. But that requires you to play ball. Freddie nodded slowly, as if considering it. He closed the folder. He placed his hands flat on the table. For a moment he thought about his father, Bomi Bulsara, who had worked so hard to give his family a better life. He thought about the young boy in boarding school who had learned to play piano because it was the one place he felt completely himself. He thought about every time he'd been told he was too much, too different, too unconventional. And in that moment, he made a choice that would echo through rock history. I'm going to do the opposite. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Cole blinked, confusion spreading across his face. I'm sorry? Freddie leaned forward, and suddenly the energy in the room shifted entirely. The fluorescent light seemed brighter. The air felt charged. He wasn't the young artist being lectured by experienced executives anymore. He was something else, something powerful and undeniable. He was the person he had always been meant to become. You want me to hide? Freddie's voice was soft but razor-sharp. You want me to make myself smaller, more palatable, more digestible for people who are uncomfortable with difference? You've done your research, you've looked at your demographics, you've studied your market data, but you've missed something fundamental. He stood up, and the executives instinctively leaned back. The thing that will make Queen legendary isn't how well we fit into your existing boxes. It's how completely we shatter them. You want me to hide my identity, I'm going to amplify it. I'm going to wear the most outrageous costumes you've ever seen. I'm going to write songs that are so theatrical, so operatic, so completely impossible that they shouldn't work. But they will. I'm going to be so undeniably, unapologetically myself that people won't be able to look away. Mitchell tried to interrupt. Freddie, you're not understanding the realities of the... No. Freddie cut him off, his voice rising now. You're not understanding the reality. You're asking me to hide because you're afraid. You're afraid that the market won't accept someone like me. You're afraid that radio stations will reject us. You're afraid that we'll fail if we don't conform. He walked to the window, looking out at London. But here's what you don't understand about fear. It makes you boring. It makes you safe. And safe doesn't change anything. Safe doesn't create legends. Safe is forgotten the moment the next safe thing comes along. He turned back to face them, and his expression was pure determination. I didn't flee a revolution. I didn't reinvent myself. I didn't spend years sleeping in vans and playing to empty rooms just to hide when it finally matters. Do you want to know my strategy? My strategy is to be so extraordinary that my identity becomes irrelevant because my talent is undeniable. Barrett tried one more time. But Freddie, the data shows... Your data shows what has worked in the past, Freddie interrupted. I'm not interested in the past, I'm interested in what hasn't been done yet. And what hasn't been done is someone like me, someone with my background, my style, my voice, standing center stage and owning it completely. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to release our album. You're going to watch as we do things our way. And you're going to see that the world is hungrier for authenticity than your research suggests. People don't want another clone of what already exists. They want something real, something bold, something that makes them feel alive. Cole stood up, his face reddening. If you walk out of here without agreeing to our marketing strategy, we can't guarantee the promotional support. Then don't guarantee it, Freddie said simply. We'll make it work anyway, because that's what people like me have always done. We've always had to be twice as good to be considered half as worthy. So we become 3 times as good. We become undeniable. The room was electric with tension. None of the executives knew what to say. This wasn't how these meetings typically went. Artists didn't push back like this. They didn't reject professional advice. They certainly didn't walk away from guaranteed promotional support. But Freddie wasn't finished. I'll tell you something else, he said, his hand on the door handle. "In 10 years, maybe 20, someone is going to make a film about Queen. And the most important part of that story won't be how well we followed your marketing advice. It'll be about the moment when someone told me to hide who I was, and I chose to do the exact opposite. Because that's the moment that actually mattered." He opened the door, then paused and looked back one more time. "Oh, and one more thing. When Bohemian Rhapsody becomes the biggest song in the world, and it will, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that you looked at your data and your demographics, and you decided that the safe bet was to make me smaller. And I want you to remember that I became legendary by doing the exact opposite." With that, Freddie Mercury walked out of the EMI boardroom and into history. But here's the part that nobody expected. 6 months later, in September 1973, Queen's debut album was released with minimal promotional support from EMI, just as the executives had warned. The album performed moderately, not a failure, but not the breakthrough they'd hoped for. The executives at EMI felt vindicated. They had been right, hadn't they? Freddie's defiance had cost Queen the support they needed, but Freddie wasn't discouraged. Instead, he doubled down. He became more theatrical, more outrageous, more himself. He started wearing costumes that made even other rock stars do double takes. He painted his nails. He wore leotards and crowns and capes. He moved on stage like a ballet dancer, having a conversation with the gods. Queen II was released in March 1974, and it was more complex, more ambitious, more completely Queen than anything they'd done before. It reached number 5 in the UK charts. Radio programmers who had been skeptical started paying attention. Something was happening, and then came Killer Queen in October 1974. The song was sophisticated, theatrical, absolutely unmistakable. It reached number 2 in the UK and cracked the US top 20. Suddenly, EMI's promotional department was scrambling to get behind the band they'd tried to reshape just 18 months earlier. But Freddie wasn't done, not even close. In October 1975, Queen released Bohemian Rhapsody, 6 minutes long. No chorus in the traditional sense. Opera mixed with hard rock, mixed with ballad. Radio programmers said it was too long, too weird, too ambitious. It would never work. Freddie had a different theory. Bohemian Rhapsody became the most played song on British radio in 1975. It stayed at number 1 for 9 weeks. It became the UK's 3rd best-selling single of all time. And it did so by being exactly what the executives at EMI had warned against. Completely, unapologetically, impossibly itself. The song's success forced the music industry to reconsider everything they thought they knew about what audiences wanted. You could be weird, you could be theatrical, you could be 6 minutes long and have an opera section. You could be all of those things, and succeed precisely because of them, not despite them. Years later, in 1985, Queen performed at Live Aid at Wembley Stadium. 72,000 people in the stadium, 9 billion watching worldwide across 150 countries. 20 minutes that many music critics still call the greatest live rock performance in history. Freddie commanded that stage wearing a white tank top and jeans. No elaborate costume needed anymore. His presence alone was enough. The boy who'd been told to hide had become the man impossible to ignore. He led 72,000 people in vocal exercises. He made the entire stadium his instrument. He showed the world exactly what authenticity looked like when it was given permission to be extraordinary. Richard Cole, the EMI executive who had tried to convince Freddie to hide his identity back in 1973, was in the audience that day. He was retired by then, but he had come to see the performance. Years later, he gave an interview to Rolling Stone magazine about that day. "I watched Freddie own that stage," Cole said, "and I realized something I should have understood 12 years earlier. People don't fall in love with artists who play it safe. They fall in love with artists who give them permission to be themselves. Freddie didn't succeed despite being exactly who he was. He succeeded because of it. And I was a fool for ever suggesting otherwise." Freddie Mercury died on November 24, 1991, at the age of 45, from complications related to AIDS. But his legacy was secured not just by his extraordinary voice or his theatrical genius. It was secured by the decision he made in that boardroom in 1973, the decision to never hide. After his death, his bandmates established the Mercury Phoenix Trust, which has raised over $20 million for AIDS research and support. The organization has helped thousands of people worldwide, providing not just funding but hope, the same thing Freddie always provided through his music. They've funded hospice care, research initiatives and education programs across 4 continents. In 2019, a young woman named Sarah Chen from Singapore wrote to the foundation, explaining how learning about Freddie's courage to be himself, despite industry pressure, gave her the strength to come out to her conservative family. Her letter sits in the foundation's archives alongside thousands of similar stories, testaments to how one person's refusal to hide can ripple across generations and cultures. In 2018, the film Bohemian Rhapsody was released, telling Queen's story. It became the highest-grossing music biopic of all time, earning over $900 million worldwide. The most powerful scene in the film? When Freddie stands up to those who want him to be less than he is, and chooses instead to be more. At Queen's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 2001, Brian May spoke about his friend and bandmate. "Freddie taught us something fundamental," Brian said, his voice breaking slightly. "He taught us that the most revolutionary thing you can do in a world that wants you to conform is to be undeniably, unapologetically yourself. Not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of love. Love for who you are, love for your art, love for the people who need to see someone like them succeeding." Today, Freddie Mercury's image, the costumes, the mustache, the theatrical presence, is recognized worldwide. Students who weren't born until decades after his death wear Queen t-shirts. His songs are played at sporting events, in movies, on the radio. Bohemian Rhapsody alone has been streamed over 1.6 billion times on Spotify. But perhaps the most powerful testament to his decision in that boardroom comes from the millions of people around the world. People of different backgrounds, different identities, different struggles, who have found courage in his example. He showed them that you don't have to make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's box. You can build your own box. Or better yet, you can refuse to live in a box at all. The executives at EMI were working from data, from research, from everything they knew about the music industry. They weren't trying to be cruel. They genuinely believed they were giving Freddie the path to success. They thought safety was strategy, but Freddie understood something deeper. Authenticity is its own strategy. Being undeniable is its own marketing plan, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust that the world is ready for who you really are, even if all the data says otherwise. In a world that constantly asks us to dim our light, to fit in, to be more palatable, Freddie Mercury's response was pure genius. He became brighter. He became louder. He became more. And in doing so, he didn't just build a legendary career. He gave millions of people permission to do the same. That's the real legacy, not the platinum records or the sold-out stadiums or the billions of streams. The real legacy is every person who saw Freddie being completely himself and thought, maybe I can be myself too. That's what happens when you refuse to hide. You don't just change your own life, you change the world. If this incredible story of Freddie Mercury's courage and authenticity moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of being unapologetically themselves. Have you ever had to choose between fitting in and being yourself? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the heart behind music's greatest legends.